Welcoming to the stage, Imani Jones, Josh Crumb, Britt Burtz, and Aya Ibrahim.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us here today. I'm Aya Ibrahim, a moderator for our panel, What Happens to Human Imagination in the Age of AI. We have with us a tremendous group of people here and really excited to get into all things future of AI and people. Start off with intros, sort of what you're about and what you're most passionate about. I can go first. Aya Ibrahim, I am a strategist and policymaker working at the intersection of the economy, technology, and national security. The thing that I am most passionate about is inequality, and specifically economic inequality. So how do we build systems that let us have the benefit of all of the talents of all of our people? Britt?
Hello, everyone. Brittany Danielle Burtz, and my background is in neuro-linguistic programming and positive psychology, and the founder of a education technology that supports children with life skills and mental health in K through 12. I'm most passionate about helping others really step into their full realization of their highest potential.
Okay, my name is Imani Jones. I'm here from Rome, Italy, but originally from New York City. I'm the founder of Find Your ID NYC, which is a global creative agency that focuses on event production, marketing, and branding, and also the founder of Pink NYC, that is a nonprofit focused on creating safe spaces for women creatives. I'm most passionate as an event producer, creating opportunities for people to both connect and communicate and really celebrate each other. And I'm really happy to be here today.
I'm Josh Crumb. I live in a middle seat somewhere on a Boeing and Airbus, somewhere in the sky most of the time, but after 20 years, as of mid-September, I'll be living back in Aspen, Colorado. I'm passionate about world building, but probably even more so passionate about finding other world builders. So when I met DJ, we met in Hunter S. Thompson's kitchen about 18 months ago, and we talked about his environmental conservation projects and just hit it off right away. And I'm not sure if I know a better world builder than DJ and Mix and Sarah and Chanel and the whole crew, Eli. So really glad to be here. Very specifically, the world building I'm trying to do is actually one thing you'll probably notice on all my conversation on the stage today. Almost everything I say is going to be an absolute contradiction. So I am a world builder from a top down, which I think is actually the wrong way to world build. I think world building is always about the bottom up. But I happen to have a gift in engineering and economics and really world large scale macro systems. And that's how I got into AI. But my two world building projects currently is I'm really trying to decommoditize commodities. Create a world where, and look, everything around us comes from the earth. Aspen, Colorado came from a mining town, pulling metals out of the earth. We're always gonna have to do that, but we should do it in a way that the people that do it best get paid the most, not the price of the lowest. So that's one that we probably won't talk about today, but the other one is just around identity, and particularly in digital identity. I believe that identity systems have always been based in violence. And I think we have opportunity with technology to change the way that identity is built. So anyways, that's a longer conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really glad that you brought up world building. In an earlier panel today, talk actually, I heard design described or defined as world building. And so as we are talking about design of AI, we're effectively talking about the design of the world in which this AI is going to exist and how it interacts with people and what it looks like in their lives. And so in thinking about design, in thinking about world building of AI, how do you think about both the promise and the perils of AI and what it means for your respective industries, what it means for your work? From my perspective, I think that in order for us to leverage as much as possible from the technology, we also have to be very honest about its limits. But what those limits look like, obviously, are going to be different for each application and, again, for each field. So maybe we can start with you, Britt, and you can tell us a bit about what it looks like for your day-to-day work.
Absolutely. Well, in the context of education, it's quite interesting. And if we're following the news on AI and its involvement in our school systems, there are more and more regulations coming out and education for the teachers. So there are courses and panels all the time where the teachers will be brought in to be trained on what to look for. And of course, they're seeing many different products and technologies come across their desks at these school districts all of the time. And they do have to adhere to a lot of regulation, which I believe is very important because we are working with the psyche of these children and developing them. And in the context of my business, as we develop our technologies, we have a very conscious AI outlook on every application of that technology within our platforms and how that interacts with every child. So, data privacy being the utmost importance, and we use a variety of tools to be able to do that, to protect the data of the children and de-identify it. And then we also, so yes, the protections are number one. That is first and foremost. And then number two, it's the creativity of what we can use and create as we build our technology and continue to do that product development to allow a really exciting creative process between the end user, which is the student or the teacher or the parent, and the avatar, which is the core of our platform, is an AI-based avatar.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting point that you made, especially around the conscious development of AI. In my field, in the creative industry, we're seeing some really incredible advancements on what you can actually do as a creative or a non-traditional creative like myself, right? Someone who's not an illustrator. We can now really see our dreams realized with these tools and applications. But on the same side, you also see that those same creatives aren't being given the credit that they deserve when their work is being used to train AI systems. You're also not seeing compensation in any means for those creatives that are having their work really scraped and put onto these platforms and used for our then creations that we're creating. And then you also don't see consent, right? So you're not even given the opportunity to opt in as a creative and have your work featured or used or referenced. So I think there's a lot of positive advancements that we're seeing with AI, but we definitely need to also make sure that we're conscious in the way that we're developing the applications and protecting the creatives that will be using it.
Yeah, it's absolutely a very narrow path between promise and peril. Just to give a quick illustration, again, as an engineer, I dove just straight into this. Once the tools started coming along, the stereotypical sleepless nights, 5 days without showering, never leaving, just programming in the matrix. And my specific goal, is anyone familiar with the Dunbar number of Robin Dunbar? So it's basically how many meaningful human relationships any one person can have. It goes from something like 5 close, 15, in a very tight trust circle, 50, that you somewhat know, and then 150 sort of outer limits. And this is not just a heuristic. It's based in evolutional psychology and just the way our brains can develop reciprocal altruism and empathy and so forth. And And so as an engineer seeing AI, it's like, I'm going to hack that. Can I hack the Dunbar number? And I've started 7 different companies, so managing human relationships is a lot, shareholders and executives and everything. And so basically I set out to say, can we create digital twins of everybody in the company? And so we can actually simulate meetings, and anybody in my companies can chat with the digital version of me at any time to get a latest update or the vision of the company. And I thought this was so cool. But then as I started doing it, I realized that this is a potential disaster. And ultimately, it's actually the human bonds, it's the human frictions that matter. The end point is not really the thing. It's all of the journey and the tinkering and the struggle and the friction along the way. That's actually why we have great teams. So anyways, I shortcut it just to the end, but I definitely think there's a lot of promise for improving communication, but there's a lot of peril if we over-rely on the systems.
So a man humbled. Love that. So I often think about technology. So I've done a lot of work on the policy, right? How do you think about this and what it means for people, costs, consequences, but obviously benefits as well. But I often think about technology as a forcing mechanism. So there's a lot that we will just avoid dealing with, right? We've talked about copyright and intellectual property laws, many of which are outdated. We talk about worker protections, for example. Technology doesn't let us continue to do so. At a certain point, you just have to tackle the underlying problem. And so for so many of the questions around technology, it's about the technology, but it's also not about the technology at all, right? Something like worker displacement, it could be a bad trade deal, it could be a new technology. What does this mean for workers, and what are we doing to make sure that they are able to come out the other side of whatever progress or innovation or evolution we're seeing in a better place? On the issue of creatives and their ownership of their work, you've thought quite a bit about this, and you also obviously are a user of the technology. So how do you think about balancing, AI assistance in the creative process versus what authorship and ownership of the end product of the art looks like?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion, because you're seeing, for example, in the US, where almost nothing that's created with AI will be able to be copywritten. You would only be able to copyright the human part of the creative output that was then produced. And then you have in Europe, where I currently live, where there's a lot more flexibility when it comes to how they're viewing authorship. And so you can copyright creative outputs that are using AI if there is a significant amount of human intervention. So I think it's definitely advancing in the direction where we'll see more AI-produced products being able to be copywritten. But I think we also need to think about how we're going to then regulate how those creative products are going to be then put back onto the system. Are other people going to be able to replicate them? Are there going to be any regulations around what is considered to be creative originality, or what's considered to be a combination of both? So it's definitely a bit of a slippery slope. But I was reviewing a case here in Colorado with Jason Allen, who was a artist that won a digital art fair. And it came out that he produced the work with AI, and then he wanted to copyright his work, right? And he actually reviewed his prompts over 600 times before he got to the final point of feeling like, this is my work. This is something that I'm happy with. And in that situation, I would definitely agree that, you are putting in so much work, working alongside the AI, that there is a ground to make that copywritten, right? You're then at that point, I think, the author of it, but it's still pretty debatable. So I think it's definitely going to be like a case-by-case basis.
And there is that underlying tension, or question of, do we value artists at all? And how do we value artists? Do we compensate them fairly for their work, for their labor? This was a big issue with the strikes in Hollywood, I guess now 2 years ago.
Right.
And AI was a sticking point. Like, who actually owns their own creativity, their own imagination?
And also their likeness, right? Because you saw some cases where actors, for example, Back to the Future, right? He didn't want to actually be in the next version of the film, and they were able to kind of manipulate his image to really show him still in the film. And this, with AI and now deepfakes, this is going to become even more of a trend, right? If we don't regulate what consent is and what that means for the creative industry in the age of AI. So I think we definitely need to have regulation around this and really be strategic in protecting the creatives and making sure that we maintain control over our uniqueness and our image and our creative outputs. So,
the point about regulation and oversight is an important one, and I know that views differ. Some feel that it is an obstacle to innovation, but the fundamental question of safety, and safety as an enabler for the very best version of the technology that we can design. Brittany, you mentioned the stakes are so much higher when you are dealing with children and their psychological development, their psyche. There's a question of lessons learned or not from our experience with social media. I'm sure folks heard about the lawsuit against OpenAI this week. A young kid took his own life after engaging with ChatGPT, and the parents sued this week. There have been other cases in the past on previous versions of tech, older social media platforms. Did we learn lessons? Did we not? How have you incorporated those experiences, those consequences, that the gravity of you're creating things for kids and what that means?
It's a huge responsibility. And as a builder of technologies, utilizing these tools and creating these tools, we make it a point to set our intention from the very beginning and our standards to what we're going to do, to every spin-off of every interaction that a child might have with that tech. We'll look at every data set and every option that it could take them. And we want to make sure that our technology is always guiding and pointing in a direction that is in alignment with greater good and positive psychology. Now, that's for us in our own ethical practices. However, it is of a very big concern to myself, and I think many of us, that your child can interact with a technology that maybe is programmed differently, right? And that dialogue, you don't know how that was programmed initially to guide that conversation and where it could guide the thought processes of that child, which can lead to the child feeling certain emotions and feelings and thinking a certain way. So we must take it very seriously, and I plan to speak a lot more in the future about the ethical practices of AI and what we can all do as consumers and builders. Consumers, what you can look for and have to ask for when you go out there to make that purchase, because our dollar will drive the direction of where these builders and how these builders are going to continue to create.
No, I think that's exactly right. And there is something to be said about the expertise that you have and you all have separate and apart from the technology, because the technology isn't created in a vacuum, and in the instances where it is, I think historically it has not turned out very well. And it is so important to ground it in some additional technical knowledge, some subject matter expertise, particularly as it relates to the specific application. So Josh, as a builder of systems, how have you leveraged your, business knowledge, your financial expertise, but also your engineering background. And why is it so important that you have that additional grounding in some knowledge set that's not just the technology alone?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the theme of this conference, which is about design and having this intentionality. Look, the artists and creatives are obviously on the front line of attack here. I think that's very obvious, and in general, artists are always kind of in the first phase of any movement. But what I think is not recognized enough is that design thinking and creativity isn't just about traditional forms of art. If I am a back office compliance person at an exchange, I have a creativity in how I'm solving a problem. I have a creativity of my workflow and all of these super boring business words, but that's your skill set. That's your hard-earned work that is also getting sucked up into the machine, a creative process that is replacing yourself. So even in our company, we want to always make sure that the human is in the loop, and the human is the most valuable of this. Because I do see a world, even beyond just creatives, very soon, that it's going to be very hard to ever leave a company. Because if all of your AI tools are there, and your digital twin is there, and all of your creativity got sucked up into this machine, it's very hard. It's not like you can go to another job and just use Microsoft Word and Excel again. You're going to have these tools that were very specific to your job that may be locked in your job. And that's a real problem. We need to design systems that keep the human in the center of everything. And I don't think companies are thinking that way.
Right. But then that just, Imani, please.
No, I was just going to piggyback on what you were saying, keeping humans at the center of design, because one of the most concerning issues that I saw when I was reading the article about what happened with Adam was that in the text thread between him and the chatbot, there were several attempts for him to, where he asked the chatbot, should I talk to my brother about this? Should I leave some hints for my family? And all of the messages that he had where he was trying to connect with humans, the chatbot was telling him, no, you should confide in me, right? And you can keep this with us. And I think that this creates an opportunity where you all as developers and builders can think about how we can design collaboratively with mental health therapists, not look to replace mental health therapists with chatbots, but actually find ways to create systems where we can still have human connection and be driven back to being connected with each other. So I think it's really important work what you're doing.
That is exactly what we're doing with Universal Tutor, and I'm so proud to say that. A lot of people ask, are you replacing a teacher? Are you replacing a student counselor? What's going to happen with our teachers and counselors? And the answer is absolutely not. It's designed to help the facilitators be even more effective. And what's interesting is you could have a conversation like that go very far without any regulation, no controls, no alarms that are sent off to anybody, and there should be. There absolutely should be. And in a controlled environment with positive intention, in a conversation with an avatar, those notifications absolutely should be sent to parents, to teachers, to individuals that can intervene immediately. And I think that the result here is that if we can build technology that will complement the humans to do their job and to do it even more effectively and to catch things even earlier on. So a lot of times we're dealing with lagging indicators in life. But what I suggest is that we can use the technology to create leading indicators and drive our human empathy and attention to fix something and get a result immediately.
I think that you touched on a very important point, which is technology as a complement and not as a substitute for people, for humans, and the things that they uniquely can do. I also think that requires humility. So for there to not have been a human involved at any point in that exchange, for there not to have been people with your expertise, for example, who are informing the development and the design of this technology. I mean, in doing policymaking, often find myself very frustrated because I would come across a similar lack of humility. It's like, how can we be better if we don't admit what we haven't gotten right? How can we be honest about where we need to go if we're not honest about where we've been? And beyond humility, I would argue the flip side of that coin is empathy, right? Humility in the design and empathy in the deployment. Can you all talk a little bit about where empathy fits into what is inherently the construction of automated systems, right? And particularly in this moment where it feels that, in a moment that feels increasingly devoid of empathy, we're increasingly alienated from ourselves, from each other, from our communities. You want people to adopt this technology. Why is empathy so important to that being done in a way that is best for as many people as possible and that is most positive for our collective advancement?
Want me to jump in? Maybe I'd frame it this way, that empathy is the thing that the system just can never have. It's the, the way these systems work is, it's just a predictive algorithm of the next word of the next, the next thing. But that's exactly what it's missing is human empathy isn't always just about predicting what the next thing that the other person needs to have. It's actually listening to the person. And so I think it's all of the, it's empathy, and not to get off topic, but it's also grace, it's forgiveness. These are things machines can't do. And this is again, getting back to that humility. This is where we need to have humility that these machines cannot do everything. But I feel like the current zeitgeist and the leadership from the top trying to build these things is that we are all just these meat computers, and that if we throw enough processing power, we can, consciousness will emerge. Every time I hear consciousness just emerges, I think magic. Nobody knows what consciousness is, the ghost in our own machine, right? We're not gonna know what that one is either. So I think by focusing on things like empathy and grace and humility and things that the machine can't have, that's actually how we keep the human in the most valuable part of the systems. Sorry, I got off topic a bit.
No, it's all connected.
I definitely feel that you can use AI to be more empathetic, right? I've seen it happen with loved ones and family members where, instead of reacting first, now they're reacting first on the platform and then responding to their friends, right? So getting some unbiased advice on how they should go about certain conversations or interactions with people. And, when you use it in that sense, you can be a little bit more empathetic with some guidance from AI. But I think you also need to have the humans at the center of the AI development, because you don't see empathy being played out right now in how AI is being used in certain systems, especially when you think about how we're using AI now to screen candidates, right, for job applications and screen candidates for housing opportunities. We need to keep human empathy at the center of those decision making opportunities and building out those platforms wherein we are actually keeping humans first and not perpetuating some of the less empathetic traits of history that we've seen to date, right? So not continuing to instill racism and biases and sexism into the development of these applications, but making sure that we're monitoring them and making sure that they are producing more empathetic results.
Yeah, I mean, we're also seeing it now expand to medical decisions with the same sort of set of biases ingrained there. I would push back a little bit on the idea that these systems are unbiased, because someone is designing them, someone is feeding them data. So it's a question of like maybe differently biased. But I turn to you, how much of it is what we are putting in, right? Is there a way in which you design systems that insulate from some of those things? Or is it fundamentally, at the end of the day, humans are human, they're going to create a thing and it will reflect the humanness of that human?
Wow, this is a dynamic question. I'll start with, I think, what organizations that are utilizing these AI tools can do to kind of put like a checks and balances in place, because they can test, and part of that test is testing it, the data, that the outputs, with humans. So you'll create like a committee, and the outputs that come out, you feed the data in, the outputs that come out, the recommendations that come out are now checked with a committee of humans, right? So you're getting that human element of empathy, humility, forgiveness, all those other little things that, you know, we as human beings might be able to intuit or see. And so I think that is a big thing that companies are doing right now, to test the outputs that are coming. It's going to be very important going into the future. In the context of what we do in education, the human is highly important, because an output that comes from one of our avatars is going to go to a teacher. That teacher is going to take that data in, and that teacher is going to be able to make their own decision about what to do from that point forward, right? From that data that comes out of that avatar. But there is a checks and balances where you have to put borders in place of how far are we really going to allow the machine to recommend before we get a human involved to get that level of empathy there. And, you know, one of the fun things that I've enjoyed doing, building these avatars, is training the tonality of the voice of the avatar to have more empathy. That's a very surface level thing, which is fun to do, and it causes like a better relatability with a child when they're playing with it. However, it still never replaces that human touch, that look in the eyes of a human being looking into the eyes of that child. What we're using this for is a relatability tool to share information and take in data to create this co-creative process between the teachers, the counselors, the parents, and the child. So it becomes like a bridge of communication where everybody is taking this learned knowledge and they're going out there and applying it in real life, and then they're coming back in, interacting with the technology, and they're growing together with it.
I mean, the idea of a committee, it strikes me like, you know, you have a thing that happens, and then you run to the group chat, and you're like, hey, am I right to crash out? Should I not? Like, should I be upset? That is a thing that we do in our day-to-day. But in building the technology, there's sometimes this instinct of wanting to separate how we do things as people versus how we want the machine or the system to do it. Going back to you, a resident engineer, you know, what is driving that impulse? Is it simply easier to take the person, the human, out of the design of a system, even if it's for people? Is it a lack of humility, maybe? Is it a desire to go as quickly as possible, and that creates friction, which is something that we've talked about? But tell us a little bit based on your own experience.
Yeah, again, I'm going to be full of contradictions, because actually most of the things I learned about AI was writing multiple books with an echo of myself that I created writing about AI. Yeah, I think it is just that engineer tinkering mindset of I can just keep doing this better. I can solve the whole universe. And it kind of comes back, back to sort of brain psychology. I love Ian McGilchrist and The Master and His Emissary, where we have, kind of if you think about the left brain and the right brain, it's not necessarily like engineering and creative or something like that, but it's more about your right brain is the more, should be the master, the more human side of it. And the left brain is really serving the master through things like language and math and science and abstractions and symbolic systems. But we've allowed that sort of abstracting brain to kind of take over society, whether it's through finance or through engineering and big tech. And so more and more, the emissary is now taking over the master. Mm-hmm. The human, the more embodied, right brain is really what should be driving our decisions and our, building our communities. But again, and I recognize that as the left brain, abstracting, like I probably already thrown out 4 frameworks today, which are all left brain thinking, right? And so. Yeah, I think that this is gonna be the challenge, because our society right now is dominated by big tech and big finance. And by the way, I'm both, so another contradiction. But
he's self-aware. That's good.
That's about all of it I've achieved. But I think that is the problem: is we want to abstract and abstract and abstract, and we're forgetting the humanity that we should be serving.
Yeah. I mean, it's messy. Like, humanity is messy. Being human is messy. So I can understand the desire to want to get away from that. But in terms of the sustainability of some of these things being designed, it will be dependent on whether or not it is compatible with the fact that we're people, and with it all the good and the not so good that comes along with being people. A little off script here, but for you all, like, if you had one hot take on AI or on tech, specific to your own usage, your own work, or just generally, right? Like, what's the biggest misconception? What's your biggest hot take on this tech and where it's going? Maybe we start with you, Josh, because I feel like you've sitting on quite a few.
Yeah. I think the hot take is, again, back to the contradiction. We're never going to be able to, I don't think pure AI books, pure AI movies, all of these things, yes, they're technically possible, but I don't think they're going to be what people think they are, because ultimately art is, consciously or subconsciously, a human reaching out across the void to another human. I'm thinking about what I'm going to answer your question, because I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about the audience. I'm thinking about humans. And a machine can never do that, right? And so I don't think, again, there's this, we're in this zeitgeist of that, machines are going to take over, and, we watched all these films from the Terminator to the Matrix to, Deus Ex Machina and everything else, and it's just going to go that direction. I think they're all wrong. I think we're seeing signs that somehow it's going that direction, but I actually think we're putting a generation through university right now, and my niece is just starting her freshman year at university, and I think this generation is going to see more than anybody else that the humanities and humans are going to be far more important than AI, because the AI is going to basically just automate all those symbolic systems and all that abstraction. But the humanities is actually the important part. So I'm actually very optimistic. I don't know if I can back that up in anything, but I'm optimistic that the humanities actually are going to have a resurgence because of this.
We can manifest.
Yeah, I would definitely echo what you mentioned there. I think one of the biggest fears right now that you hear is that people are, under the belief that AI is going to eliminate jobs, right? And realistically, people who are using AI are going to be taking over those jobs. So I think that you need to not really be afraid of the technology. You need to learn about it. You need to learn how to be at the forefront of innovation and really focus on yourself, your own creativity, how you can use the technology to create the next trend that you're going to see in your industry, and really just, just be a trendsetter in this movement, right? Because AI, I don't think is going anywhere, and I think people that are still running from it are going to find themselves in a really, really difficult place in the next 10 years if, you know, they're not learning how to integrate it into their systems and learning how to use it properly. So I think, you know, people need to be more aggressive when it comes to educating themselves around these platforms and see, because there's going to be a lot of new jobs also that arise just in the same industry, you know, and you can be one of the people taking advantage of being at the forefront of those new job opportunities. So yeah, that would be my hot take.
Love that. I think for me, one of the big misconceptions out there, especially when we are interacting with OpenAI, is that it's pulling from all of the information in the universe, right? Therefore, the answers that it's giving me must be incredibly accurate. And what from me, having a background in linguistics, you quickly find out that the way that you're formulating the language when you're talking to it is also influencing the way that it's responding to you. So it's not sometimes the question that you're asking, it goes to the finite little details about how you're structuring the sentences when you communicate to it, which could actually totally divert the direction that conversation goes. So my thought is to remember how purposeful and conscious we need to be when we're interacting about the use of our language and how we're structuring that and how that might be influencing the output that we're getting.
I think all of that just speaks to an intentionality on the front end, right? Being very clear about the problem that you're looking to solve and if and how the technology that you're building could be a solution or part of a solution to that problem, which brings us back to, again, humility, to empathy, and to expertise beyond just how do you build the system. I think that we are getting close to time. We will be doing an informal Q&A on the porch, so outside of the Aspen Collective, and you can come and you can ask more questions of our incredible experts and panelists here. I want to thank everyone again for making the time. Yeah. And just to maybe give us a little bit of a full circle moment, the first panel was about social cohesion, and they talked about a specific instance that really captured the importance of mentorship. This conference is meant to bring in new voices and younger people. And so for those who are more established, who have come across a young person who is looking to get into some of the things that we've been talking about, like please look to build with them, to connect with them. The future of the solution for some of the problems that we've talked about may be sitting in the audience. And so I really hope that this is the beginning of a conversation that continues for a long time into the future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.